Hey everybody, it's the Mad Master here. I'm doing a video today, a video review of the new Iron Maiden album, Senjutsu. So, just before I want to premise this, that been an Iron Maiden fan since February, pretty much, of 1989. As crazy as it sounds, as a kid, and my brother had this video cassette tape that my father purchased for him for his, what birthday was that, 17 or 18? January 20th was his birthday, but he had this video cassette lying around. I used to stay the weekend with my father, or one of the weekend days or whatever, and Saturday nights usually at that point. And I was really bored one night because my brother would just, I was a kid, so my brother would go to the bowling alley down the street to get laid or whatever, and I started watching it, and lo and behold, I fell in love, and that's things have been downhill ever since. So I've been an Iron Maiden fan since. So I have a little historical perspective on this. Now, I bought this album on CD. I didn't buy it on vinyl, which I'm probably gonna be buying more vinyl as time goes on, but I did buy it on CD, which has this pretty awesome cover in my opinion. I think it's their best cover in years. I like it more than Book of Souls, and I like it somewhat better than Final Frontier. It's certainly better than Dance of Death, Matter of Life and Death, and probably better Brave New World too. As far as the covers go, I like it better. Probably best cover since Fear of the Dark. In all honesty, I think it's pretty cool. I like the Samurai Eddie, which was kind of foreshadowed with Made in Japan back in the day. So, what do I think about this album? Well, I think it's pretty good. Starts out with the song Senjutsu, and I like it. It's kind of a classic Maiden thing with maybe a little darker touch, and it's kind of mid-paced, galloping kind of song. It almost reminds me kind of like sort of a Bruce solo song meets a Maiden song. The second song is Tortigo, which it's another galloping kind of thing with darker stuff on it, and a catchy chorus. One of the first things I've noticed though about this album is that it's definitely a return to form for Bruce, because Book of Souls, whether you can blame his throat cancer, or was it tongue cancer or not, his voice was missing something even before that. Even on Final Frontier, Matter of Life and Death, he was straining so much. It was kind of rough on it. Just sounded like his voice was it was just, and there's parts of that on here, parts like that on here, but it's not as prominent. He sounds way better than he has in years, and that's probably the highlight of the album for me, is his voice. So Tortigo's pretty good. Mind you, I just listened to this all the way through over the last 2 or 3 days, and I finally listened to the second disc. I fell asleep listening to it on my computer because I have another copy on my computer the other day, and then I just didn't focus on it. And then today I actually listened to the second disc all the way through again. So the third song is Writing on the Wall. Very controversial song. Kind of reminds me of first thing I thought was Garth Brooks' Thunder Road, and I don't know if that's a compliment or a complaint. It has a country-ish kind of tinge to it. I actually like it. I think it's cool. I don't think it's great. It's certainly not really heavy metal, not heavier metal, But I like it. Lost in the Lost World's next. I like that as the only part of this album, one of the only parts that has an actual repeating chorus, they've been infamous for more recent years. Pretty good song. Days of Future Past, even better song. Adrian Smith and Bruce Dickinson written song. And that one is about my favorite, or it's loosely based on my favorite comic book character of all time, John Constantine, also known as Constantine. The comic actually had in the 80s or 90s how to really pronounce his name, and it is Constantine. And actually, I used to do this thing for a while. There was a more modern Hellblazer John Constantine comics that came out They're a little bit more cartoonish and more juvenile. Some of the series, because the original Hellblazer is very adult, but these more recent ones and some of the animation stuff, I call them Constantine, and there's Constantine is the more adult version, you know. So great riffs on that song. It's probably one of the best songs on the album in some ways. The Time Machine, I believe it's about the H.G. Wells. I'd have to read the lyrics. Some really corny parts, but pretty good lyrics. Pretty good song overall. And then we come to the second disc, Darkest Hour ballad. It kind of reminds me of Wasting Love in a certain way. It kind of has that kind of like dirgy kind of thing. I like it. It's not great. Death of the Celts. It's the next one. It's The Klansman Part 2. I mean, that's basically what it is, with some extra added like Thin Lizzy, Black Rose kind of parts. We'll get to that in a second though. The Parchment, you know, it's kind of a, you know, that Middle Eastern kind of melodies that Steve Harris sometimes does, you know, like a Power Slave. Actually, that was Bruce Dickinson that wrote that song, but it's a similar kind of not concept, but you know, the melodies and stuff. Hell on Earth, Where the Wind Blows Part 2. It's not that great. It's okay. So overall, I do like this album. My favorite of the post reunion era remains, as controversial as it sounds, The Final Frontier. I thought The Final Frontier had so many cool different twists and turns, like that first song before Satellite 15 or whatever. This songs like that, just little twists and turns, a little dissonant part here, like weird turn here. Not in like a clunky Empire of the Clouds way. Of course, that's controversial to say because people love that song. But an actual way that sounded like it flowed, and the production was better too. Now, this production on this album is way better than Book of Souls. Way better. It sounds way better. It sounds more smooth, more fluid. Like I said, Bruce sounds better. He doesn't sound like Grandpa Simpson this time around, which is kind of mean about Book of Souls. But Book of Souls was hard to bear because his voice was, you know, he had cancer, so he had a problem with his voice, obviously. But it seems it's like Dave Mustaine when Dave Mustaine injured his hand for whatever weird reason in the early 2000s. I don't know if it's drug or alcohol related, but he sat on his hand overnight and he had nerve damage and had to recover. He got better as a shredder after that. When, you know, System Has Failed, some of the stuff he did it surpassed some of his stuff in the 80s, in my opinion. The songwriting, you know, I love The System Has Failed is my favorite post Rust in Peace album. It remains to this day. Songwriting's been mixed since then, but you know, overall, I think Dave Mustaine recovered. It's just same thing with Dickinson. Dickinson recovered from cancer. His voice sounds better than it has in years. Probably Dance of Death levels. Maybe not at the level of Brave New World, but definitely pushing that boundary again, or pushing up towards that again. In my opinion, he sounds a lot better. He doesn't strain as much. It's a lot more fluid, more smooth. You know, even a Matter of Life and Death, he was getting that straining thing going on. He does strain, but it's not as bad. That's the highlight of the record for me, is Bruce Dickinson. Now, the other good thing is that they don't repeat the choruses. Now, this is a very wordy record. It's kind of like, kind of reminds me of Blind Guardian's Beyond the Red Mirror, because it's like, there's not a lot of discernible hook choruses like there have been on previous albums. It's like this steady flow of prose, you know. It's kind of like Gentle Giant, Genesis, you know, all these words. I mean, Genesis had a lot of catchy choruses too, but there's a lot of Genesis in Steve Harris still, you know, these soft parts in the beginning, you know. That's kind of a Genesis trademark from the 70s Genesis, not the 80s Genesis, of course. I like it a lot. I will listen to it again. Book of Souls is hard to listen to, like I said, and I think some of the songs on there were clunkier in certain ways. These flow a little better. Now, the choruses on Book of Souls are better in a lot of ways, even if they repeat it, you know, a lot, you know. And I mean, The Red and the Black was a great song. Empire of the Clouds, I do like Empire of the Clouds. I just think it's kind of clunky. And also, you know, I like Book of Souls, and I think if Eternity will fall or fail or whatever, I like those songs, probably the best ones off the album. Other than that, I think some of the songs were just kind of filler throwaways that sound like Iron Maiden trying to sound like Iron Maiden. Death or Glory had potential to be some kind of new wave of British heavy metal, like that kind of that 70s sounding kind of, you know, kind of riff, like driving riff that they bands used to do, like even Sweet or Thin Lizzy or whoever. That wasn't, but it didn't succeed. I like it better than Book of Souls in many ways. In some ways, I do like Book of Souls better. Now, on to the real criticisms. I think Iron Maiden has missed out on having 3 guitarists in a real concrete way, because you listen to Power Slave, and I'm a person that's criticizing them, and Maiden fans, what Ralph Vieira would call Maiden tards. I'm not going to use that word in a real way. I'm just saying people that are like fanboys. Okay, that's another term. Fanboy Maiden fans will be like, "You're bashing this album or this song. It's so stupid." Okay, so I'm bashing Iron Maiden for taking out their harmonies from a lot of their music now. They don't have as many harmonies, period. So what usually happens since 1992/1995, they've been doing this. They'll have one guitarist play the lower part of the neck, a melody, and the other guitarist, or 2 guitarists, or whatever, they have 3 guitarists, will play the octave up, and it's not harmonized, it's just an octave melody. And I think they're really missing out, because they have 3 guitarists. Then the other guy will play whoever's playing the riff below it, and then they have keyboards which play something similar, and then they have the bass which plays something sometimes different, sometimes similar. So they're missing out on the 3 guitarists. Period. That's my opinion. They could do a lot more with 3 guitarists. They just haven't explored that. When bands play with multiple guitarists, they can do a lot of stuff. Even there's this band Television from the 70s. It was one of those proto-punk, post-punk bands. The guitarists are playing something completely different all the time. It's really cool how they interweave these guitar parts. Iron Maiden has so much potential to do that with 3 guitarists, but yet they choose to do these kind of boring stock things a lot of the time. Now, it doesn't mean it's bad. They do go all over the place with these single parts. On this album, especially more. So I'd probably put this in between Book of Souls and Final Frontier as far as me liking it. I really like the Final Frontier. I thought Final Frontier, at least up to a certain point, it was missing something too, but it had a lot of good stuff, like Satellite 15. Who would have ever thought they would do something that dissonant, and they had other songs that had just weird kind of twists and turns. And it could have been a better album, like any of the albums since Brave New World, pretty much. I mean, I'm just going to be straight out and honest that they have not delivered a true classic album. And Brave New World it's marginally a classic, but it's like, since Seventh Son, they really haven't really been on that level that made them who they are. But they're still very enjoyable band and who make for very enjoyable albums. I'll just say, I'll listen to any Iron Maiden album any day of the week over half the metal that's out there, and still enjoy it. Still find something to enjoy it, even if it's not like their best work. This is definitely not Iron Maiden's best work. Now, that said, it is probably better than Book of Souls, at least on a production point. The production, and obviously Bruce sounding better. Now, the production, I think they should, I'm going to say this, and Razor Fist and Ralph Vieira and all these people have probably said all this already, but they need to get rid of Kevin Shirley. Kevin Shirley is a good producer, but and this one sounds better. The drums sound a lot more, solid and crisp, and it sounds more smooth. It's kind of like Final Frontier, like the mastering is better. Or if there is mastering, who knows, because they've said they don't master albums anymore since A Matter of Life and Death or whatever. I don't even know what the truth is on that. But let's check inside, actually, if they master it or not. Let's see. Who mastered this album? I'm not even gonna look. But anyways, produced, co-produced, mixed, mastered by Aid Emsley. I guess they do have mastering. They had mastering in this one. It sounds a lot better, right? Book of Souls, suffered from these types of things too, but it is a little bit better than Book of Souls in some ways. I think they could have had more catchy choruses, though. The first disc definitely surpasses the second. No offense to Steve Harris. I mean, other than the song "Death of the Celts." I mean, I think that could stay. And I do like the Parchment. That's something I'll have to listen to it again. It is a little complicated. I like these complicated Maiden songs, by the way. I'm not going to say I don't like them, but it's difference. This is the problem with Maiden, is that there's a difference between meandering in one key and doing these little parts and actually being progressive and using different types of stuff. Now on the second disc, he's not just playing an E minor, Aeolian the whole time, and that is a good thing. It's one of the best bass players in metal, by the way. But there could be still, like, the Final Frontier, an album between this and the Final Frontier, and having some of those obviously melodies, like the vocal melodies from Final Frontier, some of the better ones, and mixing this type of progressiveness and some of the progressiveness from Final Frontier would be the perfect new Maiden album, right? Taking bits and pieces. It's like listening to Theater Pain from Motley Crue, and then Girls, 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 and then making a mixtape or a mix disc or a mix playlist of all the best songs from there. Like, well, you could have this song on there, you could have this song, but that's not the albums that were released, but it's still better because you can make this list. So I like the album. I love the cover, and they're my favorite band. They could do, I still think they could do so much better. It is good. They got to reintroduce those harmonies, though. That's one thing. I mean, those harmonies have to come back. There are some, I believe there's some harmonies on there, but like even Book of Souls had more harmonies, like even with the first song had more, which was written by Dickinson. But yeah, it's good. I kind of like the wordy approach, because it's a little refreshing change from saying "Brave New World" 1,000 times, or "Don't you think I'm the savior? Don't you think I'll save your life?" Repetitive choruses. No, but they might have gone a little too in the other direction, because it's like Beyond the Red Mirror, Blind Guardians. Like, you hear this, you don't. There's no like real choruses some of the time. Like, it's not as catchy. I've kind of got this Pendulum Swung a little too far in that direction on this album. I still like it. It's just going to be hard to like memorize, like in your head. It's just like repetitive choruses, as bad as they can get with Iron Maiden in the past. You won't forget it, like Angel and the Gambler. You won't forget that shit. As shitty as it is, I do like Angel the Gambler, the 3-minute version that they never put. They should have put that version on the album, the 3 or 4 minute version, instead of the 10-minute version or whatever the fuck it was. But and I did buy that brand new when it came out for Virtual 11. I still like it. I don't care. But anyways, yeah. So I like this Japanese mythology kind of thing too, and I like that. The aesthetic has always appealed to me. So what would I rate the new Iron Maiden out of like 5? Let's say we went with the old school Rolling Stone. Speaking of Rolling Stone, in the previous video I talked about that. Rolling Stone, like Kerrang or whatever, out of 5, I would give it 3 out of 5. I'd give Book of Souls maybe 2.5 out of 5. I'd give Final Frontier probably 4 out of 5. But that's hard, because it's like these newer Maiden albums. It's really tough to rate. It's tough to rate, because it's like you've been listening to this band most of your life. You like all their music, but you're not a fanboy. You can criticize them. Like I said, they need harmonies. They need to come back. Those need to come back desperately. The playing is good, and it's going to take some time to sink into. I'm sure some of these songs need to sink in more. That's why it's a little more inaccessible. It's a little bit more harder to absorb. It's a little less penetrable than even Book of Souls, which I still think, because of Bruce's vocal troubles during that record, it's harder to listen to that album than this album in many ways. But like the Book of Souls live, the versions that were live on the live album sound fantastic, even compared to the studio versions. Now, another criticism about Iron Maiden is they need to like hammer these songs out. Everything I read is like, oh, we went to the studio, we just started recording and writing at the same time. It's just like, bands used to take stuff out on the road and hammer it out live on the road, and then they'd go to the studio. Some part might be missing, they might have taken out a part or here or there, but they actually played them live. These songs, like Pink Floyd, were famous for doing that. Like they played Animals before it became Animals, you know, and like the Wish You Were Here tour, Raving and Drooling, or whatever it was called back then. Even did that with Dark Side of the Moon. You know, they did all that, and then they would go to the studio and like, oh, this is how this should go differently. They'd hammer things out live, and they'd rehearse it and practice it so many times live. They were really tight in the studio. Maiden doesn't do that. They just go to the studio, start writing. It's like, oh, we'll just do this. And considering Kevin Shirley's like, I just bloody play it live. Yeah. It's just like, it doesn't, it just, you know, it's the music suffers. Martin Birch was a fucking taskmaster, and he was, you know, he really cracked the whip, apparently. You know, when you watch the Number of the Beast documentary, it's like 3 hours of vocal takes for one part for the song Number of the Beast, like the beginning. You know, it's like finally got Bruce got pissed off. I don't know if it was 3 hours. I'm just, you know, you watch it and he says it's like all these takes he had to do, and he finally does it, and he gets so pissed off that he finally does that scream, that famous scream. So they need someone like that again, someone to crack the whip, someone to try to put him into shape. Now, that doesn't mean it's a bad album. It's pretty damn good. It's better than Dance of Death. It's better than Book of Souls in some ways. I used to like Matter of Life and Death, and I'm a little less like, I think it's better than Matter of Life and Death just because it's like, it just has more interesting melodies and stuff. So those three albums, yeah, it's better than Virtual 11, but Virtual 11 is like a guilty pleasure of mine. And is it really better than Virtual 11? I guess I'd say it is, but from a quality standpoint, of course. But is it one of their better albums of the reunion? You know, I think Final Frontier and Brave New World are still the best ones. Obviously, there's nothing compares to those first 7 80s albums and live albums, whether it be Beast Over Hammersmith, Live After Death, or the actual full-length version of Made in Japan, which is on YouTube, which I would highly recommend watching or listening to, because it's one of the best live albums ever made, in my opinion. Made in Japan is the best Maiden live album. If it was the full-length show that they recorded and they released as a fan club only thing in like the early 90s, it's the best Maiden set ever. It's insane. Just listen to it. But anyways, 3 stars out of 5. I do recommend it if you're a Maiden fan. If you're new to Iron Maiden, I would not buy this album. This is not the album to buy. Not the album to get into if you're first exploring Iron Maiden. The aesthetic is awesome. I love the cover. I like the first disc, the first half of the album better than the second, even though it's the second one's mostly Steve Harris. I still like the first half. I think it's more interesting. Other than Death of the Celts, which I like a lot, even though it's a Klansman part 2, basically, but it has some weird kind of parts, but it needs fucking harmonies. You know, where's the harmonies? But that's about all.